Hey coaches, welcome back to Football Talk with Coach Chip. This is part 2 of our deep dive into Army's run game with Coach Clint Humphrey. It's a special series of videos, make them in their own playlist. We just covered the blocking scheme, how they do the scoops on the backside and all that in part 1, and now we're going to get into the fullback dive, which is blocked with inside zone blocking. And there's actually going to be some video, the great diagrams and the narration as well, but we got some actual clips of Army running their fullback dive with inside zone blocking, and Coach Humphrey is breaking it down. And remember, he spent 6 days, I believe it was during Army spring training back in 24, with the staff, learning it, and he converted it to suit his, in Alabama, it'd be a mid-sized school, but in most parts of the country, it'd be a very small school. And it's able to be used at a small school, and that's really cool stuff. All right, don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the video. Remember all of the freebies that we have, the resources that are available to you here from Football Talk with Coach Chip. And let's get on with it, and let's see what Coach Humphrey's got to say about the fullback dive.
And you want to be simple with it, man. Like, I'm a firm believer in like when we get to our rules here in just a second, so we're going to talk the front side of zone dive. You'll notice our rules are very simple, very simple. Because the backside we're scooping, right? So we're not worried about coaching anything from here over. We want to just stay here and kind of live in this world. And really the mentality.
But what you just showed us on the backside, as you mentioned earlier, when you're repping up those scoops, guys, you're repping up how many plays, Coach?
Coach, if you run, anytime you run a play with a scoop on the backside, I mean, you're getting reps.
Yeah, that's what's so awesome about it. So you do 5 minutes a day in your ID time, once everything's in, of course, and you're scooping. You're getting so much bang for your buck because you're getting your inside zone, your outside zone. Probably what you do on the toss too, right? I mean, just
100%.
And so anytime you can get 2, 3, 4 plays, which is one of the reasons why I talk about gap down backer, because the down blocks are the same on all these plays, and this is a similar scenario in this zone scheme. Go ahead, man.
So really the front side is where the terminology changes a little bit for people that aren't super familiar, because there's a lot of takes on zone dive in the option world. There's a lot of takes on what we call zone follow, but this is the closest thing to Army that you're going to get. So when we start with the play side guard, his rule is base, and he has a mentality that he's what we call a B seam protector. So he wants to block anything in, on, out, or up on him. So and we kind of have the calls here. So anything inside of him, meaning a shade, potentially a 2-eye, if we're in that kind of game plan mode, he's going to make a bow call. And essentially that just means, hey, I'm going to knock this guy back to the center to help him out. That way he can get him scooped, and we can play this thing in the B gap. The best way to think about it, Coach, is really he's going to kick, or he's going to kickstand is a kind of a visualization I have. He wants to prop the B gap open, and then if there's a defender in the B gap, he's got to block him. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So if we get any sort of A gap presence, if we had a shade here, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, he's got to keep that shade from coming into this B gap where we're trying to run the football. And then if there's anything in the B gap, and again we're gonna draw all this stuff in a minute, he's got to block him. Whether he gets a dingo call, which is what we call a knockdown double between him and the tackle, or however we choose to kind of go about that, could be potentially a game plan call. So the next thing we're going to talk about, we're going to bump it out here to the tackle in the slot, and they're using a technique that we call Skim. Now the I in Skim tells us we're going to take that inside footwork through that defensive end, through number 1 in the option count. Here's 2 in the option count.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And that tackle is also protecting the B gap, but he's skimming through this inside guy. We use the term power. It's hard to draw on this thing. Power veer is the best way we do it. What that means is we want to be thick through this guy with our eyes on this inside linebacker. Because if anything happens, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in an even front, versus an odd front, because that guard, like versus a head-up four technique, because this guard's uncovered, this tackle doesn't need to have a lot of B-gap presence. He can really lean and be thick on this defensive end and create a double team with the slot. But if this guard gets called over like on a bow call and has to go backside for some reason, well, if this backer pops, well, that tackle's got to fit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, he got B-gap, yeah.
That's right. But gap integrity, and you know this, gap integrity would dictate if he pops B, that end has to be responsible for C to some degree. Now, he's going to be thick on that guy's hip, but that makes it where we can fit him with the tackle, and this slot can get inside leverage. And we talk about ear on hip, right? We want to get our right ear, if you're the slot right here, on this defensive end, on this four techniques hip. And the key to it, and we talk about the 4 Ps, I actually got this from Navy, the 4 Ps of blocking, which is pad level, pop, push, and proximity. I should have made a slide with that. The word proximity is really important because this fullback is sprinting through his landmark, through the football, through his landmark. So it seems difficult that a slot would block a defensive end, but he's going to get inside leverage, and he can get run over. As long as that fullback is clearing the line of scrimmage while that slot's ear is getting on that defensive end's hip, the play's going to have a chance to be successful, and you're going to see a bunch of clips of that here. Now, the last one we're going to talk about, this is a really easy one, and one word I left off is dig. All right? The third man in the surface, whether that's a receiver or that's a heavy tackle or it's a tight end, he's responsible for number 2 in the option count, which is just the next man outside of number 1. But he's got to take 2, but he has to have a mentality of I'm digging number 2 out because I've got to gain inside leverage, and I don't have to have an ear on the hip mentality because of positioning, but I do have to have an inside leverage mentality. I've got to win inside of number 2 to protect where this ball is going to get ready to get slammed up in there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's a very different world living in this, and it's a lot easier to teach off the film.
What if number 2, that backer, right, the outside backer, when I was running defenses back in the day, if you gave me a tight end, I was going to find a way to give you a 7-tech. So tell me.
He's got to dig it.
So he's going to dig that. He's digging out that C gap. Whether it's a 6, 7, 9, that's him. Okay.
So we use 2 different terms. So every like a lot of offenses do. So you're responsible for a gap first, and then you're responsible for a man. So he's responsible for number 2 in the option count, but I've got to have a mentality of I'm digging this C gap out. So if we were to get a linebacker like you're talking about lined up inside leverage right here, he's got to take a path and get inside. Now, if that guy squeezes, which he should, a good 7 technique should, he's going to end up getting washed down, and that's when you're going to end up looking like a wedge because we've got all these guys right here, and what the fullback should do is slide this thing and scrape paint off that block.
I saw him do it in the clips. Yep.
And that's and when you coach the fullback, we're talking a little bit more today about the O-line aspect of it, but I'll show you some clips where the fullback uses them, we use the terminology sink or slide. So when you're looking at your action key, if the action key gets pushed out, right, you want to sink this thing back into the scoops. If action starts crossing your face, you've got to slide it and scrape paint as tight as you can get to whatever gap it is that you kind of end up popping out of. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What did you mean by action key, Coach?
So as a fullback, when we're running this play, we always want to action key the B-gap defender. So like, for example, if we're versus a 4-eye, and this, Coach, this is a little different. This is a hot button issue in the option community, I suppose. Who this fullback action keys? To me, you want to action key this defender right here because what's going to end up happening is we're still skimming through there. Well, Coach, and we're going to talk about this in just a second, but just for the sake of his action key, we're looking at this action key, and if this double team gets pushed out, we're sinking this thing vertical through the A gap. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If this action key ends up just getting blasted back, or it ends up getting hung up inside, which is more likely, getting hung up inside, we want to slide this thing off. Some teams will action key this play side linebacker. And coach, if you ask me on a Monday, I might tell you action key the inside linebacker. If you ask me on a Tuesday, I might tell you action key the 4-eye or the B gap defender, because I'm to be honest with you, I'm a little back and forth on it myself. And I think to some degree it can be a little bit of a game plan thing, but you're just trying to action key to give yourself enough of a gap that you can stick your nose up in there and crease the box, because it becomes really difficult to kind of fit this. So versus a 4-eye, as soon as this defensive end comes off of being head up, he's now a B-gap threat. Anytime we have a B-gap threat, could be a 3 technique, could be a 2 technique, could be a 4-eye. We want to make a dingo call, all right? Now, a dingo call to us, honestly, Coach, I forget what Army, the terminology they use, but a dingo call to us is the same way they do it, is what we call a knockdown double.
Okay.
Knockdown double. We have 0 second level responsibility. It's a 2-on-1 board drill. We're trying to get hip to hip, and we're trying to blast that 4-eye vertical to create an easy read for our fullback and to create movement. We want to block that inside linebacker with the 4-eye.
Deliver him to his lap. Put him in his lap.
That's what we're trying to do. And here's why it works. Because you're getting a double team right here with these two, and half of the play side A is getting scooped by the center. If this guy pops, the center's going to take him and the play's going to slide. And because the slot is skimming, once that end goes inside, the slot ends up on that linebacker. So you really have what we call an under and an over player on that inside linebacker. So there's no need for us to come off of this double team, and that's how we really like to block this play, because it really gets the thing moving. And again, we talked about, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, when this guy gets into like some sort of a 7 technique, that's when we want to get into the zone follow world. That's kind of what cues us up, because now we're trying to take this thing a gap wider and take advantage of that guy essentially playing the quarterback. This is kind of how we think about it. Now, versus an even front, like I said, we're still skimming, so it's all still the same rule. So we're skimming this B and that C gap with our eyes on that inside linebacker. Now, versus a shade, or like I said, potentially a 2-eye, we're going to end up getting a bow call, which calls that guard over and says, hey, you're going to knock this A-gap player over to our center so he can get him scooped. But because of that, it creates a little concern here for this linebacker popping in the B-gap, and that's where your tackle, when your tackle hears a bow call, he's got to have the mentality, and he's got to know, hey, if I'm now the only B-gap player, if this backer pops, I've got to take him and keep this play alive. Now, if we get a 3 technique, that's a B-gap player, outside shoulder of the guard, we're going to dingo it. We're still skimming the C-gap with the slot, ear to hip of that defensive end, and we're still taking 2, digging that C-gap out. Again, now we're going to get a bob call on the backside, so we're going to get a half scoop right-left with our center through the inside shade with the mentality of taking that fitter and delivering that nose to the backside guard. If we get A-gap pop, what are we doing? We got to fit that guy.
Yep.
So we have to have a little bit of presence in that A-gap as a center, and your center really has to be a good player in this offense. That's kind of
I thought about that a little bit ago, too. I said, you're going to have a kid that can – it ain't like my mindset, just find somebody that can snap it. You got to have somebody that can block.
If your best lineman really probably has to play center. The mentality you want to have when you build this thing is this guy and your guards have to be road graders, and they have to be pretty good players. Your tackles get a little bit of relief. They don't have to be quite as good as those inside guys. Just the kind of the nature of how everything fits up. All right. Now we're going to finally get to some clips. Now I'll skip this. We'll talk it through the film, but it's the same thing. So if you get what we call a 4-1 box, which is just a 4-3, all the rules are the same. It's just a little bit different front. So we'll go ahead and get into the film. Does the film look good, Coach?
Looks good, man.
All right. So again, let's just draw it right here. We've got an odd front, and this is a TV copy because they used to be a lot better. So we're getting a bob right here with the backside guard in the center, and they're trying to deliver this and work into that backside linebacker. We have looks like a 4-eye. So we're getting a blast right here. We're getting a dingo call, and we're trying to dump that guy in that linebacker's lap. This guy's taking two, digging the C-gap, and this slot is skimming with the inside tackle. Well, since that guy's a B-gap player already, I know I'm skimming in case that guy slants outside. But if he doesn't, I'm working as fast as I can, and I'm trying to knock this linebacker into the secondary. That's a good job of the double. And in some of these TV copies, it's from Army from a couple years ago, and so you're going to see them cut a little bit more a couple years ago than you do in the film now. But you see how these backside players are losing some ground
just to try to get that backside scoop. And this is a really good example of proximity. When you watch this
fullback come through the line, he's into the line of scrimmage when the slot is throwing this block on this inside linebacker. And right there, that's a 1st and 10 play. They gain 5 yards. That's about as successful as you can hope to be running zone dive on first down.
I'm watching the guard tackle double team. Oh, my goodness. Now, you can really see that when you say it looks like a wedge. And I think somebody commented on that video, Coach, that when it started, that video that started all this between us, they commented, it looks like wedge. And it does. It did.
You really want to have a wedge mentality, Coach, I want to be honest with you. So right here, you have a 4-eye. Again, it's the same front, same defense, just a couple plays later, or maybe a couple plays earlier, I don't know. And this is what you're looking for. You're looking to divide the box with a scoop, but here's a good example of that. See that nose? If you watch this nose right here, he's trying to bleed over into this A-gap and reacting to the center. Well, watch the center take him. And that frees up that backside guard. He's trying to get on that hip of that nose, but he's really trying to get vertical to that backside linebacker. You see him trying to get his hat involved in the play right there at the end.
And the backside, and I just realized this, you're cheating because the backside guys are getting involved almost on the play side.
It does.
And so it's the same premise of just trying to get more people at the point of attack than they do, which is basic art of war, you know?
Right. And so you watch, this is a good example of a left foot step from this. Now, this is a heavy tackle, I believe, down here at the bottom. But this is a good example of really digging this C-gap out to create a crease to run this ball in. This heavy tackle takes a good left foot step, trying to get vertical inside shoulder on that guy. And he doesn't have a devastating block, but he does a good enough job of prying this B-gap, this C-gap open to give the fullback, give a big back a chance to work. And if you look at the top, Coach, this is probably the thing that's the most interesting that the Army does is you look at the top, that's a receiver at the top. Coach, he's scooping the backside C-gap. Watch him.
Yep. And he's just getting in the way.
It's almost taking an O-line mentality and applying it to your whole offense. That's a little bit different formation, and you get a little bit different trade right here. But if you watch at the top, it's another good example. This is a good example of number 2 is clearly concerned about something other than the dive. So you see the third man at the surface, the heavy tackle at the top, just reach his arm out and extend to try to hold that guy, and it doesn't matter. The fullback's cleared.
You can see him kind of, what is the term you use when the fullback slides, or he kind of.
So this is a what they call a 4-5 slide. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There's your 4th step in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
5 gets you vertical, and you want to scrape paint with that double team and be as tight as you can be to get vertical. This is a 2nd and 3, so obviously a really successful first down before this. Now they're scraping paint. and trying to get up in there. That's a 5-yard gain.
Yep. That's staying ahead of the chains, brother. Now, is the quarterback reading anybody on that, Coach?
Nope.
Okay.
This is a straight give. Now, they will. Well, there was a couple of years they tried to run a little kind of outside veer scheme off of this,
and I don't know. To be honest with you, Coach, I don't know if that's something they still do. I don't think it is.
So here's another good example of that nose trying to slant front side. But really, this is a good example. Watch that linebacker right here.
My God, watch.
He doesn't know where to fit it.
Watch the step of the backside tackle, the one at the bottom of the screen. Coaches, watch his step. He's so quick off the ball. Look at it. Is that a 3 tech he's getting in?
Probably a 4. Nah, a little bit more of a 4.
Oh, yeah, but the other kid just started scraping right away. He started sliding the D in.
He's pinching for sure. Yeah. They're trying to pinch it.
They're probably making a call as soon as the motion goes, and they go to the motion.
Something like that. All right, now this is a really good example. So if you'll watch this inside linebacker right here, this is kind of what I call getting caught in the wave. So he can't fit play side A. You're going to see that in just a minute. And this 4 eyes getting blasted by these two, and we're digging this guy out right here, and we're trying to work this skim up to that guy. The problem it creates is there's nowhere for him to go.
Dude, that defense, that's 1970s triple option defense. Those defensive ends, see how they're flexed back a little deeper? And they got their hands back because they're reading and reacting. And you'd see that a lot back in the 70s and the 80s. When everybody was running triple option. Here's the problem. Army's not blocking triple option, so those guys that are flexed back, they're giving them a target to hit.
Right. And that's the big thing is triple option to Army is really a counter play. It's not Paul Johnson always told people that, hey, we get called the triple option offense, but we only run it 15% of the time. And so our Army's no different. I don't know. They're probably about 12 to 15%. I would imagine that's probably about where they hover. But they want to be a power run team. They want to run this. If they could run a zone series play every play, that's probably what they would do because you're able to progress the ball. But if you don't spend all week on triple, then when that ball gets pitched, there's not going to be anybody there.
Correct.
And that's the predicament you run into. So this linebacker really doesn't have anywhere to fit it. That's a really good example, too. This is another good example of that slide that we talk about. 1, 2, 3, slide off of it, get vertical. Make that guy tackle you. It's almost a duo mentality, like you see in the NFL in short yard, not just short yards anymore. That back press, that duo, everything get washed across his face, and now I'm going to cut outside of the tight end wing combo, and I'm going to get his vertical. I'm going to get vertical as fast as I can. But I put this clip in here. This is actually from Army this past year. We'll go ahead and go to the butt shot. But it really is a good example, and they teach this play a little different now than they did in some of those TV copies. I prefer the method from those TV copies a little bit better. So this is a good example of right here, we're working the skim with the tackle and the slot on this 4-eye. Now, this skim should have a mentality of, and they're working this skim up to this backer fitting, right? That's what they're thinking. Now, when this guy lines up inside leverage, the tackle is thinking, I've got all of him. And this guy should be thinking left foot first, right foot, scrape paint in case this guy jumps outside, which is unlikely, but in case that happens. And then you'll see why they do that here in just a second. They end up, I'm going to play it slow, this 4-eye ends up jumping outside.
Oh, my.
The tackle lets him go, and now you've got a 2-man wedge almost in the B gap on that inside linebacker.
And that's not a devastating block by 22 there. He's just fitting up on his inside, and so you don't have to have a thumper play in that slot spot.
It's all about proximity. It's all about proximity. If you can look at where that block is thrown
and where the fullback
is. he's right behind him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so this guy who's trying to defeat the block, he can't be concerned with pressing that guy in the gap and trying to get that fullback.
If you isolated 22 and 7, the defensive end and the slot, and put them in a drill, everybody go like, oh man, that defensive end, man, he blew him up. He won that. Physically, see, look at it. He didn't win, y'all. It ain't about blowing people up. This is awesome.
What is it they say? What's the saying? The sum of the parts are more.
The sum of the parts are greater than the whole.
Yes. So it's like, you know, all these plays from an individual perspective are, you know, maybe in your offense they don't fit, but you're going to see in a minute when we start talking follow, and that's really what Army was good at this past year. That's what Bryson Daly scored 32 touchdowns on. What you're going to see is when these guys make it hard on the slot to get him blocked, you're going to see Daly jumping outside of that guy, and now they've gained leverage with the tackle, and now the play is hitting the gap wider. And then eventually, and this, I believe this is the last clip, eventually this is what happens. The fullback ends up either sliding it or sinking it backside, and I want to show the block of the slot too. Watch the slot at the top of the screen. We'll go in slow motion.
He got blown up, but it was a good block.
Proximity.
Again, you see that if you just that one-on-one in a drill, you think that linebacker won that battle.
Yeah, well, one-on-one in a drill, that happens every time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So you see the fullback slide it, do an unbelievable job of scraping paint with the defense.
So much so that he almost gets knocked down.
He scrapes paint and gets vertical, and now he's got a chance to score because they fit themselves out of the play.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big man running for a lot of yards right there. That's the I think I referenced Buchanan earlier. That's Buchanan. He was probably the best. I might get a butt shot of this on this TV copy. Let's fast forward and see. No.
All right, coaches, that's it for part 2 of our deep dive into Army's run game. This one's been on the fullback dive with the inside zone blocking. All right, don't forget your opportunity to support Football Talk with Coach Chip. Go over to buymeacoffee.com/Coach Chip. You can find me and a whole bunch of other coaches over on Football Talk with Coach Chip group on Facebook. It don't take a whole lot to get involved in that. You just got to be approved, and the only way you can be approved is be a football coach or somebody that's just wacko about football. And all we do is talk football and share schemes, and it's a pretty cool thing. And also you can hit me up at Coach Chip at Chip Seagle on X/Twitter, Twitter/X, whatever the crap we're going to call it. And don't forget the podcast available on Apple, Spotify, and I think most every other podcatcher. We got our freebies available only to those who subscribe to the channel. So right now, go on over there, click subscribe if you're not a subscriber already. And while you're doing that, you might as well like it as well. And then share it with all your buddies and tell them about Football Talk with Coach Chip. We got all kind of good stuff going on over there. I'll send you a freebie list if you want it. Here it is right here. And I'll send this to you. Just hit me up. Email me at seagle.chip@gmail.com. Also, you got your chance to explore any concepts we have covered. I'll get into them deep with you. You can hire me as an analyst. I'll be on your staff, virtually that is. We can Google Meet. I do that with coaches all the time. Not too far away. I'll venture out and see you. Went up the road and visited with some coaches just recently and just trying to help out, trying to give back to the coaching community. Over 40 years of coaching experience is just an email away. And we can do a Google Meet, do consultations that way. We can do installs that way. I helped some guys back in the fall with a little bit of their film and just kind of being a second voice, somebody that's not in the room. You know, sometimes when you're pulled back from it, you can see a little bit better. Again, hit me up at seagle.chip@gmail.com. All right, that's all for part 2 of our deep dive into the Army offense, into the Army run game. Be sure to go over and check out part 3. We're going to get into the quarterback follow, which was the video clip that caused all of this for Coach Humphrey and I to meet, and him commenting on it and me finding out that he had pretty good insight into it after spending time with them up at West Point and getting kind of the inside scoop on what the Black Knights of the Hudson were doing with the zone scheme and the old flex bone being married together. All right, until next time, hey y'all, be elite. All video clips contained on Football Talk with Coach Chip are meant for analysis, criticism, comment, teaching, and research by football coaches. We believe this falls under the fair use doctrine of the Copyright Act, Section 107.